Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. And thank you for joining this audio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast as you're driving along in your car or your truck or in public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the increasing mention of and discussion even in legal reform groups, law reform groups, about what they call restorative justice. Now, you and I may think that restorative justice is, say, for example, someone breaks into your house and they break the front door, they break the window or damage something inside the house. And when they're caught, they're held accountable and they have to pay for the repair to the damage. And that gives you the knowledge that, well, it means that your place was restored, your house or whatever it was restored to the condition it's in before the burglar or the lawbreaker broke the door down, but also that the person who did it got caught and hopefully has been taught a lesson that, hey, this is antisocial behavior, you've broken the door down and you had to pay for it to be fixed. And that to me for me at least, that would be, well, I'm not out of pocket, the thing got repaired and the perpetrator was caught and held to account. That would be at least one sort of take on restorative justice. But the feminists and the radical ideologues want to apply this to race and gender and LGBTQ issues. So it's no longer a matter of actual restorative justice. It's a matter of ideology, and they delve into the vast chasm of the vast miasma of ideology. So restorative justice is whatever you want it to be, and it's very much pitched along victim oppressor lines rather than lawbreaker and victim of the lawbreaking. It's cast among, again, done ideologically. This is the ideological oppressor, this is the ideological victim. So restorative justice reaches back centuries, thousands of years. Well, men have always oppressed women, therefore, white people have always oppressed black people, therefore, straight people have always oppressed, gay people, therefore. And so it's that paradigm of thought and consideration. Now, the one that I've been looking at recently is restorative justice for rape victims. But this delves into an interesting area of what I think is the future of jurisprudence, whether we like it or not. It'll be ideologically imposed upon us, but where there is no victim. So there's been no court case, or there's been no determination that somebody was or wasn't raped, and also the idea of someone being a victim, the umbrella for rape has increased to unwanted sexual attention, unwanted touching, unwanted sex, or not rape where she's consented, agreed, but technically she had one drink too many and therefore she couldn't give consent, therefore it's technical rape rather than actual rape. She was fully consenting, but has later on decided to withdraw the consent, arguing that, well, I couldn't really give consent. How this could be considered as equality before the law is way beyond my comprehension. But anyway, this is what the ideologues are pushing. But what they're wanting now is to separate any determination of criminality and have a category where someone can assert they're a victim and that therefore they're entitled to restorative justice. Now, this can be unwanted touching, which they claim is traumatizing. So the victim, without there actually being a victim, they're based purely on their assertion or their accusation or claim or allegation. They can be, if this new area of jurisprudence takes effect, they can claim they're a victim, an oppressed victim at that, and can institute a program of restorative justice. So no court's heard the matter, there's no evidence, there's no proof, there's no nothing, but she can say, well, Billy Bob touched me inappropriately, or Billy Bob had sex with me, but I didn't really consent because I had too much to drink or something. So, and then the state can force Billy Bob to enter into a re-education program to be advised and finger wagged by angry lesbians as to his wickedness, and he can be forced to be, this is in their ideal world of restorative justice, Billy Bob can be forced to come along to like a group session where there's a whole bunch of women that claim they were somehow, you know, touched inappropriately, whatever, didn't give proper consent, or up to and including, as I understand it, right? But and Billy Bob has to sit there so these women can scowl and stare at him and just let him know what an evil motherfucker, bigot Nazi he is. So, and he can be compelled to do that. And if he doesn't, he can be fined or even have some form of detention and that sort of thing. So this is the world that they envisage, that why should we worry about whether a court determines guilt or not? She said it. She said she was touched inappropriately or raped. That's it. That's the end of the conversation. That's the end of the discussion. We don't need any more evidence there. She alleged it. End of story. Now, okay, she alleges that, fine. Now, two things then happen: that she gets lots of angry feminist women fussing over, oh, those bad men, those evil, oppressing us for centuries. It's all girls together, and they can play Doll's House, they can play Kids in Sandpit, they can do it. So she gets all that attention. Maybe she gets free this or that, or handouts, or maybe she can take a week or two off from work with pay because she's so traumatized. And again, the traumatizing doesn't need proof or evidence; it need merely be asserted. And but then the next stage is that some man is forced to be held accountable for his evil actions. Not that he necessarily did or didn't do anything. He's a representative of straight white males, and they are an oppressor class. So purely on that basis, he should seek groveling contrition for his evilness, or the evilness of his group and class of people. So evidence isn't really meant to matter anymore, and he has to sit there and be punished, in the same way that the New York court arranged for that sham trial for Donald Trump. It's not that he actually did anything. It's just like, he represents the evilness of a class, that sort of stuff. And so he's, the guy will be dragged into, maybe under some sort of threat or coercion. Maybe he's going to lose his job if he doesn't. Something like that. They'll be threatening him with something. So no, he's not really guilty. He's just culpable, and that's a slightly watered down form of guilt. And this is what this restorative justice is, because she needs to be spiritually and psychologically healed. So it's not a matter of compensation for breaking the window or kicking the door down for the burglar or anything. This is a matter where she can assert or allege a certain degree of psychological hurt or trauma, and then can demand that there's a healing process that she and the angry lesbians around her can determine, but which can be inflicted on him, whether he actually did or didn't do anything or not. Maybe he didn't turn up for the date, or so. Maybe he dumped her for another chick. It could be anything, but she can claim psychological hurt, and he has to be made responsible for that in the context of restorative justice. We see the same thing with race hustling and, say, compensation for slavery that happened 400 years ago, or whatever the case may be. My ancestors 400 years ago were brought to America, so I'm entitled to compensation for that. What? That type of attitude, that architecture of thought, of ideological logic is applied. Now, I just want to sort of talk more widely about this, because this type of thing has actually been around for quite a while. It's just we should be concerned that it's expanding outside of what was first off its original jump off point. Now, just to illustrate this, any woman can go into any social welfare, social security type office, and she can want a payment of some sort, maybe for herself, maybe she's got a kid or something like that, or now maybe she's never actually applied for some sort of welfare previously, but she can go into anyone, and the standard response and the mandatory response is, we're not going to give you a penny until you name the biological father of the child or the children. And she must say, well, I don't know who it is. I was dating a million guys at that time. It could be any one of them. All right, well, who do you think it could be? Well, I think it's Billy Bob from Smithville, and he lived on somewhere near Jones Street, I think. So okay, so then they can pull this up. Billy Bob Smith, was it? Okay, right. And they can, all right then. Well, given the age range you're mentioning, there's 10 Billy Bobs there, and 9 of them are only intermittently employed. There's one guy here with a steady job, and he's got a fairly decent income. If he's the one, then we can get $1,000 a week off him. You can get $1,000 a week. We'll go after him. If it won't cost you a penny, we'll chase him. We'll go after him. We'll kick that motherfucker Nazi bigot ass of his. And so he's got to give you $1,000 a week. Do you want it to be him? Well, I don't know. It might be him. I don't know. Well, you said it was a guy who was, had brown hair and was 6 foot. Oh yeah. Well, all right then. So do you want to say it's him? Oh yeah. All right then. Yeah. I mean, we'll give you money right now if you do. Just sign this form. Now, as soon as she signs the form, that's the bar of evidence to go chasing after Billy Bob for child support, backdated child support, alimony. The evidence bar is very, very low. There is no legal process at all, none. It is only she signs the form. Now, technically, that sworn statement is a legal document, but she won't be held to account for it if Billy Bob's not the guy. Who cares? No one gives a shit. No one's going to go back and say, hey, you committed perjury. And effectively, she's being blackmailed by the state anyway. You don't get a penny unless you sign this right here and now. And you have to name somebody. If you don't know who it is, then we'll suggest that it's and they'll invariably pick the person, in the event the woman does not, they'll invariably pick the person with the steady job and the highest income. Invariably, that will happen. So it's very much a stacked deck. And again, there's no legal process. Now, if Billy Bob wants to contest it, which he's going to, if Billy Bob wants to contest it, he must go through a full legal process, full court hearing, judges, lawyers, the whole 9 yards. She can kick it off by just signing a form, so administrative, but he has to go through the entire legal process. And if he wants to take it to court, he's going to have a waiting list of, he'll go on a waiting list of 2 to 3 years. If she wants to take it to court, she can have that happen in days. But if he wants to contest it, it's years, which again shows the sort of ideological nature of all this. Now, if Billy Bob does take it to court and wins, say Billy Bob say, well, I want a DNA test. Oh, I don't even know this woman. I was never in California or whatever during the time, so it can't have been me. Don't care. You'll have to wait for your day in court 3 years from now. In the meantime, you have to pay up, you Nazi mother. So Billy Bob's in a bad place. He said, "Well, I demand a DNA test to prove paternity in this instance." Now, depending on the jurisdiction, Billy Bob's maybe got 30 days to prove, get a DNA test. That's the only window. But the first court hearing, because it has to be approved by a court, the first court hearing he can have for the DNA thing is 6 months away. So when it gets to court, the judge can, and this is what they do, it's a scam. They can say, well, you're outside of the 30-day window. And he said, well, I did apply in the 30 days, but you guys wouldn't hear the case for 6 months. Not our problem. You should have tried harder. So the DNA test is denied. So this is the sort of thing that goes on, and where the evidence bar is very low, but where the penalties for the ideological, in this case, the guy, is very high. Now, if he wins it in 3 years' time, and not many cases end up being one, but if he does, then he can't get back any of the money they've taken from him. So his life is ruined for 3 years. He may have lost his property, his house. His financially, his life will be shot to pieces. But that's it. There's nothing he can do about it. She doesn't have to pay back the money. The government doesn't say, sorry, we got it wrong. We harassed you and went after you. So we need to understand, I think, this idea of the low burden of proof on one side of the process, but the very high burden of proof on the other. Now, coming back to the rape thing, One of the biggest complaints that the rape ideological fanatics have is that only 5% of the cases that go to court end up with a conviction. They see this proves there must be something terribly, terribly wrong. They argue that by going to court, the victim, again, and the victim hasn't been determined. The court hasn't even heard the evidence or issued a verdict, but they say that the victim is being re-traumatized by the court case. So they have to give evidence. Now, they don't say, well, the person could be put in prison for 20 years for something he didn't do. Isn't that going to traumatize them? Doesn't matter. He's a straight white male Nazi fascist fucking Hitler. So it's okay if that happens to him. We're concerned about the victim, the fragile victim, not the evil straight white male. If he goes to prison for something he didn't do, it doesn't matter. It's not important. If innocent people go to prison, that's okay, as long as we get at least one of the bad guys. I mean, that's an astonishing attitude to take, but it's one that they hold and is held widely by the ideological fanatics. And this sort of gender conflict thing, it attracts ideological fanatics like flies to shit. They just can't stay away from it. They love it, revel in it. So this idea of people of guilt being determined not based on evidence, not based on facts, not based on that anyone was a victim at all, but purely based on ideologies, where all these things are heading. And even in a court case, some of the things they miss is the people that take the plea deals. There's a lot of particularly the brown and black people, they've got them dead to rights. I mean, there's no way they're getting it, but no point in having a court case. So these people take a plea deal. Look, you're going to get 20 years if it goes to court, but if you take a plea deal, you'll be out in 5 years. And plea deal done. So, but with the straight white males, the court, the cases, the charges are based very much. It's a he said, she said, but based the amount of where straight white males are involved, the amount, not all of them, but the majority of them, by far and away the majority, are a technical rape. She had half a glass of wine too much, therefore. So there's no victim here, many would argue. There's no victim to be, and there's no case to be heard. Now, activist prosecutors are very keen for the straight white male scalps and very keen for precedents that the half glass of wine will mean that the guy gets 10 years in a slam. These men won't take plea deals. So, hey, I haven't done it. She was consenting, and everything was fine, and we've been dating before, and this. What's the issue here? I mean, this idea that it was his rape is absurd. I'm not taking a plea deal. I'm proving in court. So, because it's a gender conflict thing, they're taking these cases to court, and they're losing. So they're butthurt and sore about losing cases where they had no evidence to begin with. It was never a case they were going to win. So they're only taking these cases to court for ideology. And again, the judges that I know, their courts are clogged up with very low bar evidence rape cases, not with serious cases that should be heard, murder or whatever. So the dead to rights rape cases aren't being heard in court, and they're missing those out. So they're getting plenty of convictions with a plea deal. It's the super low evidence ones where they're not getting, and this is where they're butthurt. So this should be rejected out of hand, I believe. So when we look at this wider issue of ideological law and the level of evidence required, I think it's very important. This is resisted. And so, well, if you want to take a matter to court, you must have the evidence. Coming back now to the idea of restorative justice, where there's, if you like, an under tier or a sub tier of taking the matter. Okay, we won't take the matter to court, but we're still going to declare you as a victim, and so we're still going to arrange. We're going to fuss over you. We're going to, force some sort of guilt trip on the man, whether he's guilty of anything or not, doesn't matter. And we're going to try and organise compensation for you. So I think the next step would be anyone who alleges they're a victim, automatically gets a payout, and the taxpayer pays it. And this, so I think that's where we're heading there. But this idea of restorative justice has to be, in my view, separated from ideology and separated from actual damage. I declare myself as a victim and I need to be psychologically and spiritually healed. I therefore need restorative justice. Should we be accepting that argument? And if it is, where does it go? Because it's in the hands of ideological fanatics now. I know I was talking to a prosecutor. This lady, she's a lawyer, and she works in the prosecutor. This is a few years ago now, and she prosecutes rape cases. And she was very much of the view, openly, brazenly of the view, that it's quite okay to send innocent men to prison, as long as you get some of the bad guys, the rapists in this case. And I was staggered at that. Shouldn't you be sort of really focusing on the evidence and the facts and this sort of thing? And she agrees, this woman who you wouldn't pick her straight away for an ideological fanatic, by the way, but she was. But she was of the view that it was an ideological issue of gender power relations, not evidence. So she very much saw it. Look, this is gender power relations, this rape stuff. It's not about evidence. It's not about facts. And so she and then she looked at me and because I was arguing the case that facts and evidence matter and due legal process matters. The rules of evidence matter. And the conduct of we have to keep activism out of the law and so on. And she looked at me and sort of shook her head and said, I don't know why you're worried. You're not the sort of person who'll ever be convicted or charged or accused of raping anybody. You're just not that sort of guy. She's, I know a rape. I can spot a rapist at 100 meters and in the dark. And so she claimed that she could tell a rapist and so on. And I doubt that, by the way, but because her prejudices would play into it primarily, I would think. But she said, well, why do you care? What's the problem? Why do you give a shit what happens? Why do you care if innocent people get sent to prison? It won't happen to you, so what's your problem? I was aghast by that. She said, well, it's never going to be your problem, so why do you care? No, it's not. We should all be concerned about jurisprudence and facts and evidence and the proper functioning of the courts. But she didn't see that and thought I was a bit of an idiot for even being concerned about this. Her thing was getting those evil men. It wasn't anything about evidence or facts. Very scary, but I think that's where restorative justice is heading. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.